The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, but early in the morning he arrived again in the temple area, and all the people started coming to him, and he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he bent down and wrote on the ground. And in response, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. So he was left alone with the woman before him. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She replied, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on do not sin anymore." The Gospel of the Lord. Good morning, everybody. I really do have some very good news for you. The hour of sleep that you lost last night, you'll get it back in the fall. You know, growing up, I have many vivid memories, and one of the very things that really is implanted into my brain is what it is that we would do. So every month, my parents would gather us all into the car, and we would drive from where we lived outside of Beaumont, Texas, to Shreveport, Louisiana. We would go there because that's where my dad's mother lived, my grandmother, but she always insisted that we call her Nanny, not Granny or anything, Nanny, right? So we would go there once a month, make sure that she had food, clean the house, do the yard work, make sure that things were going well for her. And Nanny used to really like to tell us stories about when she was growing up as a little girl. And a story that really stuck in my head was this. They lived in southern Missouri, really outside of Sedalia, if you know where that might be. And they lived in a cabin kind of out on a farm. And she remembered one day they could see about a dozen men on horses riding toward the house. Now, this is not a good sign, okay? They had the 6-shooters and the guns and all this stuff. So, her mother said, get back into the corner, be very quiet. So they came in the house. They were peaceful. They wanted a piece of paper and a pencil, and they sat at the table, and they were doing some drawings and discussions and all this kind of stuff. So they left without incident. So Nanny said to her mother, she says, "Who were those men?" She says, "Well, that was Jesse James and his gang." Right? So if you know who Jesse James was, he was a pretty notorious gangster and robber. Now, I don't know if that story is true or not, but am I going to argue with Nanny? Right? She was barely 5 foot tall, but truly the last of the pioneer women who by herself, with a horse, a flatbed buggy, went from Sedalia to Shreveport, Louisiana. So I'm not going to argue with her. The other thing that she would say to her grandchildren whenever we would start fighting with each other and blaming each other who was at fault, she would tell us, she says, whenever you're pointing your finger at somebody like this, take a look. There's 3 of them that are coming right back at you. Check that out, right? What Nanny was really saying is that we need to judge less, and perhaps forgive more. Perhaps that's the message in today's gospel here. This gospel where the scribes and the Pharisees, they think they really have Jesus set up perfectly. They think they have him in the ultimate gotcha question. You see, to put this in context, the Jews at this time were living under Roman civil law. And the Romans, in order to help keep the peace, told the Jews they could live by the Mosaic law, they could practice their religion, with one exception. They were not permitted to exercise capital punishment. They could not execute anybody. Stoning a person to death would be such as that. So this question that they're posing to Jesus is they think the ultimate gotcha. If he says, no, you cannot stone the woman, he would be denying Mosaic law. Therefore, he could be accused of blasphemy. If he says go ahead and stone her, then he could be accused of violating Roman civil law. So sometimes the best answer is just no answer at all. What do we see Jesus doing? Bending down and he's writing in the dirt. Now, we do not know what he was writing at all. So we're free to speculate what it is that could have been. Now, some scholars say that perhaps he was writing the sins of those who were in the crowd in the dirt. That perhaps he was writing the names of the men in the crowd who had also had relations with this woman. But I would like to take the liberty to say that he was writing what Nanny told me, right? When you're pointing at somebody else, there's 3 fingers coming back at you. Judge less and forgive more. You know, we're called to do this. We're called ourselves to give mercy. And so we're going to have the opportunity, quite candidly, in a couple weeks to exercise, to practice judging less and forgiving more. Next Sunday's Palm Sunday, yes? And I'm sure that we'll see the pews will be a little bit more filled, that will be in here. And the following Sunday is Easter Sunday. We'll see even more people coming back, perhaps people that we haven't seen for quite a while. And we might be tempted to judge them. Where have you been? How come you haven't been here like me each and every Sunday, right? And so with the opportunity to forgive, we have the opportunity to really welcome them, to introduce ourselves. It could be the very thing that they're waiting to hear in terms of that invitation to come back and to be part of this community a little bit more frequently. Even though they have parked in your parking spot, and even though you found them sitting in your pew, an opportunity to judge less and to forgive more. You know, when Jesus stands up in the inn and he's by himself with that woman, we're really seeing a sacrament take place, the sacrament of reconciliation, where Jesus forgives her sins, right? But he says something also very important. Go and sin no more. In other words, cut it out in your life. But he doesn't just give her those words. I think he gives her grace also. And as Catholic Christians, when we engage in the sacrament of reconciliation, we likewise encounter the mercy of Jesus Christ. We receive, and through his mercy and his forgiveness, that sanctifying grace, right? That grace that helps us to do it just a little better next time. You know, last Sunday we heard the parable of the prodigal son, yes? And we heard how the father went out to meet the son. He didn't stand at the gate waiting for him, and he went out to greet him. And he gives him 3 things. He gives him a cloak, a ring, and shoes. We receive those same things symbolically also in the sacrament of reconciliation. That cloak represents the restoring of our human dignity. The ring restores us our power, our authority as members of the church. And finally, the shoes that we still have freedom. The freedom to love God or to reject him at a later date. Beautiful things that in fact we receive along with that sanctifying grace to try to do it just a little bit better next time. People have said to me, he says, you know, hey Pat, have you ever heard Jesus Christ? You know, have you ever heard his voice? And I said, absolutely I have. Each and every time I go to the sacrament of reconciliation, I hear Christ speaking to me. Now sometimes he's got different voices. Sometimes he sounds like Father Jim. Sometimes he sounds like Father Rich or any other priest that I go to. Different rates of speech, pitches in their voice, accents, etc. But through that sacrament, I absolutely hear Jesus Christ speaking to me and giving me mercy and forgiveness for my sins. Now, I have to tell you quite honestly, I really hate going to confession. I really do. You know, because it requires me to really look deep and honestly within myself, to acknowledge my sinfulness, and I've got plenty of it, and to really have to speak it and to acknowledge it. But I have to say that when I get over myself, those fears and anxieties, afterwards I feel tremendous. It's a great relief to get it off of my head, off of my soul, to receive that cloak, that ring, those sandals, and that sanctifying grace to go out and do it just a little bit better next time. That is the beauty and the gift that we as Catholic Christians have of this sacrament of reconciliation. The sacrament that will be offered after this Mass today, to go and hear what Jesus sounds like, either as Father Jim or as Father Rich. We're going to see also a short video. Father Jim interviewed a parishioner about his relationship, his encounter with Christ through the sacrament of reconciliation. So we're showing this to, inspire, motivate, perhaps to give you the courage to go ahead and make a good confession during this beautiful season of Lent, so that when we celebrate the resurrection, we're truly, fully able to do so as we celebrate the great gift of the mercy of Jesus Christ.